Look at the map. Look at the sheer defiant scale of it. It's a place that stretches the very definition of a state. It is Texas. But this isn't a story about oil derricks and longhorn cattle. That's the myth. This is the hidden history. The story of a land so vast, so coveted, and so fiercely contested that it demanded the sacrifice of nations just to draw its borders. We begin not with the Alamo, but with the silence that preceded the cannon fire. A silence that was broken by the footsteps of explorers, the ambition of empires, and the irrepressible, deadly dream of a people who believed this territory was theirs to take. This is the saga of how a wild, forgotten frontier became a crucible of American destiny, and why the Lone Star still burns with the fire of a relentless, complicated past. The Lone Star saga begins now. The year is 1519. Before the English even touched Jamestown, Alonso Alvarez de Pineda maps the Gulf Coast. Spain claims a staggering territory, an extension of New Spain, largely ignored for nearly 2 centuries. The Spanish dream wasn't gold, it was God and strategic defense. The true inhabitants, the Caddo in the east, the Karankawa on the coast, the formidable Comanche on the plains, were the real power. The Spanish established missions, San Antonio de Valero, later known as the Alamo, not as fortresses, but as attempts at cultural assimilation, often met with fierce resistance. The very name, Texas, comes from the Caddo word taisha, meaning friend or ally, an ironic beginning for a place defined by conflict. This period sets the stage for a geopolitical tension, a thin Spanish line against the expanding American frontier. The balance shifts with the fleeting but crucial incursion of René Robert Cavelier, Sieur de La Salle in the 1680s. Though a disaster, La Salle's presence terrified the Spanish into active colonization, solidifying their claim. Then, a monumental transaction, the Louisiana Purchase of 1803. Suddenly, Texas borders the mighty and ambitious United States. The question of the true western border of the purchase became a political grenade. The Neutral Ground Agreement of 1806, a temporary demilitarized buffer zone, only underscored the inevitability of confrontation. American filibusters, adventurers like Philip Nolan, begin to test the limits of Spanish sovereignty, seeing Texas as an open frontier ripe for the taking. The American shadow was growing long. The Spanish Empire buckles. Mexico's War of Independence, 1810-1821, leaves the region devastated and depopulated. Into this vacuum steps a pivotal figure, Moses Austin, a failed American businessman. He presented the Spanish governor with an audacious plan: bring 300 Anglo-American families to settle and secure the territory. The terms were simple and yet fraught. The settlers must become Mexican citizens and convert to Catholicism. A geopolitical gamble on both sides. Moses dies, but his son, Stephen F. Austin, the father of Texas, inherits the colonization contract. He shepherds the original Old 300 into the wilderness. This was not a military invasion, but a mass migration that fundamentally altered the demographics and loyalties of the region. By the late 1820s, the Anglo-American population swells past 20,000, dwarfing the Mexican Tejano population. The cultural clash was inevitable, rooted primarily in 2 issues. First, slavery. Mexico had abolished or severely restricted it. The American settlers, primarily from the South, depended on it and resisted Mexican law. Second, political authority. Mexico transitioned from a federal republic to a more centralized state under Antonio López de Santa Anna. The Texans, accustomed to self-governance and federalist principles, viewed this centralization as tyranny. The 1830 law of April 6th, banning further American immigration and tightening customs enforcement, was the tipping point, transforming colonization into a nascent rebellion. The revolution didn't begin with a bang, but with a challenge. In October 1835, a small skirmish erupts at Gonzales over a cannon. The Texan banner read, "Come and take it." This minor confrontation became a declaration of intent. The Texans, initially fighting for the Mexican Constitution of 1824, soon escalated their goals. Sam Houston, a political veteran and former governor of Tennessee, is appointed commander of the ragtag Texan army. The The capture of San Antonio in December 1835 boosted morale, but also drew the full, terrifying attention of Santa Anna, who vowed to crush the revolt mercilessly. The War for Independence was now inevitable. February 1836. Santa Anna leads a massive army to San Antonio. Inside the walls of the Alamo Mission, fewer than 200 Texan and Tejano defenders, led by William Barrett Travis, James Bowie, and Davy Crockett, prepare for a siege. For 13 days they held out. The dawn assault on March 6th was swift, brutal, and a complete massacre. The Alamo was not a strategic victory for the Texans. It was a devastating military defeat, but its political and psychological impact was profound. It gave the revolutionaries a rallying cry. Remember the Alamo? That was far more potent than any field victory. It transformed a chaotic rebellion into a moral crusade. Hot on the heels of the Alamo came the Goliad massacre. Colonel James Fannin and over 300 Texan soldiers, having surrendered to Mexican forces, were executed on Santa Anna's orders. This action, a violation of the customary rules of war, galvanized the Texan resolve and branded Santa Anna as a bloodthirsty tyrant. Meanwhile, thousands of settlers, gripped by fear of Santa Anna's advancing army, began the desperate exodus known as the Runaway Scrape, abandoning their homes and fleeing eastward toward the Sabine River. The fledgling republic was on the brink of total collapse. Sam Houston, having avoided confrontation and wisely trained his smaller army, made a calculated, desperate stand. On April 21, 1836, near the San Jacinto River, Houston launched a surprise attack. In a stunning, brutal, 18-minute engagement, the Texan forces routed the Mexican army. The capture of Santa Anna the following day sealed the victory. The self-proclaimed Generalissimo was forced to sign the treaties of Velasco, granting Texas independence. This battle wasn't just a victory, it was a geopolitical earthquake, creating an independent nation, the Republic of Texas. The Republic, 1836-1845, was a deeply unstable experiment. Mexico refused to recognize its independence, threatening constant reinvasion. The fledgling government was crippled by debt. The conflict with the Comanche, who controlled vast territories and considered the Texans invaders, was relentless. Presidents like Houston, pro-peace, pro-annexation, and Mirabeau B. Lamar, pro-war, anti-annexation, struggled over policy. The question that defined its short life was not if it would survive, but when it would join the United States. For nearly a decade, the U.S. hesitated. Annexation meant war with Mexico and upset the delicate balance between free and slave states in the Union. But the lure of manifest destiny, the belief that America was divinely ordained to span the continent, proved irresistible. In 1845, Texas was finally annexed, becoming the 28th state. Mexico immediately severed diplomatic ties. The border dispute. Texas claimed the Rio Grande. Mexico maintained the Nueces River, provided the spark. President James K. Polk deliberately provoked a conflict, dispatching U.S. troops into the disputed territory. The Mexican-American War, 1846-1848, was the grim realization of the Texas Revolution's true cost. The war was a massive American military success, leading to the capture of Mexico City. The resulting Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo transferred an immense territory, the Mexican Cession, California, Nevada, Utah, Arizona, etc., to the U.S. Texas, though not the primary focus of the cession, was now undeniably an American state, its borders secured at the Rio Grande. But the war inflicted a lasting wound on U.S.-Mexico relations and solidified the internal American debate over the expansion of slavery. Texas was admitted as a slave state, and Cotton quickly became king. The vast majority of its white population held deeply pro-slavery views, making it an economic and cultural extension of the Deep South. Despite the efforts of Unionists like Sam Houston, who was removed as governor for refusing to swear allegiance to the Confederacy, Texas seceded in 1861. The Civil War was not fought in Texas in a major way, but its resources and men were critical to the Confederate war effort. The economic engine of slavery drove the state into a destructive conflict that it barely registered until the final devastating outcome. Texas today is a place of perpetual complexity, a legacy of Spanish law, Mexican citizenship, Republic independence, Confederate loyalty, and American individualism. It is a state where the memory of the Alamo still overshadows the true multicultural history of the land. Its political identity, often defined by its fierce independence and a unique blend of conservatism and libertarianism, is a direct, unbroken line from the colonists who bristled against central authority in the 1830s. The Lone Star is not a symbol of isolation, but a testament to an unparalleled series of geopolitical convulsions, a place where empires clashed and the borders of American identity were brutally, definitively drawn. The Lone Star Saga is the story of how that history still shapes the present, a hidden history that is, in truth, the very heart of the American story.